lose meaning in life. When we lose meaning in life, we lose life itself. But the risen Jesus is a reaffirmation of hope and meaning in our lives. My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ, after 40 days of Lent and the climax of the Holy Week, now we have reached the day to sing Hallelujah, Jesus is risen. Resurrection or the Easter is the foundation of our faith. That is why St. Paul very beautifully says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, he explains the significance of Jesus' resurrection. Had Jesus not come back to life, our faith would have been a waste. That is why the church also gives so much importance to the celebration and the preparation of the Easter. For example, for the season of Advent, to prepare ourselves for Christmas. How many weeks do we have in the season of Advent? We have to wait till December. Yeah, one boy said correctly, 4 weeks. Whereas for preparation of Easter, we have 40 days of Lent. And also after Easter, we have 50 days of the season of Pasch till the Feast of Pentecost. That shows the significance, the foundation of our faith, that is Easter. Therefore, my dear friends, we need to have some clarity about the very fact of Easter celebration. Therefore, today my sharing will be having 2 parts. Part 1, the fact of resurrection, and part 2, the message of resurrection. Part 1, a few words about the feast of resurrection, the feast of Easter. The celebration of Easter is always changing every year, right? Unlike, for example, Christmas. Christmas we celebrate on December 25th, but Easter we change. Why is it so? Because the Easter celebration follows the lunar calendar. It is fixed closer to the full moon of this month. Now can you see the full moon up? Of course I cannot see, the shade is there. Full moon, based on that lunar calendar, the Easter celebration is changed. Whereas Christmas is not so. And Jesus came back to life, and Jesus raised a few people back to life from death. So what's the difference between Jesus coming back to life and Jesus raising, for example, Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, or the widow's son from the Nain village? What's the difference between Jesus coming back to life and all these coming back to life? What's the difference? Jesus came back to life, but he never died after resurrection. That's what we heard from St. Paul says, the risen Jesus dies never. Whereas the people who have been brought back to life by Jesus, they died. Lazarus died. Jairus' daughter died. So Jesus coming back to life is known as resurrection, whereas the other people being brought back to life is called resuscitation. So there's a basic difference. Sometimes our youngsters raise some meaningful questions as usual, because youngsters, they think. Some youngsters think, and perhaps others are thinking that they are thinking. Just because the tomb was empty, can we say that Jesus came back to life? For example, Matthew chapter 28, we find when the guards, the security guards found the tomb empty, they ran to the chief priests and the higher authorities. The body is missing. Then they said, okay, you go and spread the rumor that someone, his disciples came and stole the body, and that's why the tomb is empty. And if your higher-ups have any problem with you, we will settle it, but go and spread the rumor. It is found in chapter 28 of Matthew. Now the question is it possible that somebody must have stolen the body of Jesus so that the tomb is empty? What do you think? There's no chance, because there was heavy security And secondly, who would have stolen the body of Jesus? His enemies would not have come to steal the body because they knew Jesus was already claiming that he would come back to life. If we remove the body, then it will be affirming that Jesus is coming back to life. So his enemies would not have done that. Perhaps his disciples or apostles? I don't think so, because they were frightened to come out of their own house. When they saw Jesus being crucified, they ran for their life. They would not have dared to come to steal the body. Even if they had done so, if the enemies had done so, when the apostles had started proclaiming that Jesus is back to life, they would have brought back the body and kept in the front seat, or Jesus is still there, he has not risen to life. So there is no chance for anybody to steal the body from the cemetery, from the graveyard. Or perhaps is it an imagination of the apostles, or hallucination or illusion that Jesus came back to life? What do you think? You don't have any imagination of that. What's the difference between illusion and hallucination? Illusion is something is there, but we mistake it to something else. Suppose a piece of rope, we think it's a snake, or vice versa, it's an illusion. But there is nothing actually, but still I see a snake, that is hallucination. Or another example, if I think that you are all listening to my homily, that's an illusion, perhaps. But when there is nobody in the crowd, but still I think people are listening to me, that is hallucination. Now, is there any such thing would have happened? No. Because Jesus appeared to several people at several occasions, to big numbers, different numbers, and he had a conversation. He ate with them, they touched him. Therefore, it is not hallucination, or imagination, or illusion. Or is it that the apostles created the story just to make their livelihood? No. Because they were all afraid, right? They would not even associate themselves with Jesus. Then how would they create this story, imagine story for their livelihood? That's also not possible. Some would ask, why did not the risen Jesus appear to Herod or Pilate or the chief priest? Perhaps if you and I were there in his Jesus' position, would have said to Pilate, hey, see, I have come back. You crucified me. Annas, Caiaphas, see, I am here. We would have raised our collars and told them. But Jesus did not do that. Why? Perhaps in my opinion, if he had appeared to the chief priests, they would have tried to kill Jesus again. They would not have started believing in Jesus. Why? Because we have again a proof in the Gospel. John chapter 12 verse 11. When people began to believe in Jesus because of Lazarus who was brought back to life, the chief priest thought of killing him because he was the instrument to increase the faith among the people. So if these chief priests are thinking to kill the person who was revived by Jesus, do you think that they would have left Jesus if he had appeared to them? And above, my dear friend, Jesus would not go for cheap popularity, cheap advertisement. He never did that in his life. After doing miracles also, he tells the beneficiaries, don't tell others. Because they would think that Jesus is a miracle wonder worker. They would not come to him to listen to the message or to have faith in him. Rather, just for the miracles or eating bread or getting healed, they would come. That was not the right spirituality for Jesus. So even in his life, he was doing that. Therefore, after resurrection also, he would not like to have cheap popularity and so on. Rather, Jesus thought, let me appear to my people, disciples and apostles. Let them be charged with that experience of the resurrection. And let them go and tell the world that Jesus is risen. That would be more effective than for Jesus himself appearing to them, see, I have come back. Perhaps that's why Jesus didn't come. Or is it a cooked up story that Jesus is resurrection? No. Because as we heard in the gospel, the women go and tell the apostles that Jesus is risen. If it were a cooked up story, the gospel writers would not have put that message in the mouth of women, in the words of women. Because the Jewish society, they did not take women or children seriously. So if they wanted to create some cooked up story, they would have created some other way. So considering all this, my dear friends, the resurrection was true, real, trans-historical reality. And after the deep experience of the risen Jesus, and once they receive the Holy Spirit, their total life will change, as we find in the book of the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2. St. Peter says, very boldly, he tells at the face of the Jews and the chief priests and all the authorities, Jesus of Nazareth, he was a man from God. God proved it through the deeds of power and many wonders. But you crucified and killed him. However, God raised him up, freed him from death, because it was impossible for death to hold him. We are all witnesses to that. Hallelujah. From where Peter got the courage and have changed their lives, my dear friends. Therefore, Easter is the center, the foundation, the beginning and the end of our Christian life. That's what Ph.D. beautifully says. The Gospels don't explain the resurrection. The resurrection explains the Gospels. I repeat, the Gospels don't explain the resurrection. Resurrection explains the Gospel, and very true. My dear friends, coming to the second part, what is the message of this Easter or resurrection? We can have any number of reflections necessary. From the beautiful vigil that exalted Father sang beautifully, so many insights are there. From the readings that we have, from the very liturgy, or from the very fact we can have many meanings. Jesus is not buried, but Jesus is planted. There's a difference between burying something and planting something. A seed is not buried but planted. That's why it gives plant and fruits. That's why the power of life is amazing. One can count the number of seeds in an apple, but one cannot count the number of apples in a seed. Am I right? One can count the number of apples in a seed. You just cut over the apple, you may see 7, 8 seeds. I don't know, today you check at home. But can you see the number of apples hidden in that one seed? When that seed is planted, tree, hundreds and thousands of fruits. From there, several hundreds and thousands of seeds and plants goes on. That is the power of life. If a created being can have such a power of life, what about the created? What about the author of life? That's why today even science wonders about life, what life means. That will take another long time to explain. Science, medicines with all its advancements, still you do not know what life is, where life is. Is it in our brain, our heart, our lungs, our cells, our hemoglobin, our chromosomes, our genes? We may say life is everywhere, but still we cannot pinpoint where the life is. Anyway, that will take another long story. So the point is, we cannot understand the life itself, then how can we ever understand the author of life? So that's a beautiful message from the Easter. And again, no genuine sacrifice will never go unnoticed in the eyes of God. No genuine sacrifice will not go unnoticed in the eyes of God. Jesus made a huge sacrifice on the cross, and God the Father took note of it. That's why he rewarded him with the resurrection. Again, truth will prevail. Truth will have the last victory. One who laughs last, laughs best. When Jesus was crucified, the enemies were laughing at him, cheering at him, but their laughter did not last. Only 3 days. Now Jesus is laughing. And Jesus lives after he died because he lived before he died. Now you may be wondering, you lived before you died. But Jesus lived within quotes. Jesus lived a life of sacrifice, a life of reaching out. That is why he is able to live after he dies. And above all, my dear friends, he surrendered to the will and wisdom of God the Father. That's why from the cross, one of the 7 words, he says, "Why have you forsaken me?" Immediately he realizes, maybe I do not know the reason for the suffering, but God, my Father, knows why I am suffering. That's why he says, "I surrender my spirit into your hands, O Lord." And that surrender made all the difference, and he came back to life. So again, Easter very strongly invites us to surrender to the will of God. And when we surrender, we will never lack in realization of the blessings. We will never lack in our hopes. Hope always pays. Maybe it takes a little time. That's what it took Jesus also, the 3 days in the cemetery or the painful passion suffering. But truth came out and truth prevailed. Hope, when there is hope in our life becomes meaningful. And when we lose hope, we lose meaning in life. When we lose meaning, we lose life itself. When there is hope, God knows some way to bring back. You know, the Exodus experience, the Israelites, in front of them the sea, Red Sea, behind the forces of Egyptian forces. They would have never imagined how God could save them. Because big sea and Egyptian forces, they are very angry. But God made a way in the ocean, the Red Sea, and saved them. They would have never even imagined. A limitless God has limitless ways of saving us. I repeat, a limitless God has limitless ways of saving us. God, we trust Him. We have hope in Him. You know what? Sometimes back in the USA, a pastor on a Saturday evening wanted to inform his wife. You know, the Protestant pastors, they are married. He wanted to inform the wife that he would be late that evening, so he dialed the number. And the ring went, the wife didn't pick up. After some day again, he dialed a couple of times. He was only well, his lady disappeared this evening. Anyway, he went for his job and came home Saturday late night. Then the wife was asking, you could have informed me that you would be late. Yes, I was trying, but you didn't pick up. No, I never got the call. Anyway, they said, okay, some network problem. They forgot the issue. Following week, this happened on Saturday. Following week, Thursday, the pastor gets a phone call saying that, may know who's speaking? Why, what happened? I got a missed call from your phone. The pastor said, no, I got a call when? Last Saturday evening around 5 o'clock. Then he realized, I was trying for my phone. Sorry, excuse me. I didn't intend to disturb you. It was by mistake. I was trying to get my wife, but I missed the number, I think. I'm very sorry. Then the other person said, you will not be sorry because you saved my life. It was one thing. I do not know even who you are. I didn't want to even make a call to you. Then how can you say that I saved your life? Yes. Then he narrated his story. On that day, Saturday, evening 5 o'clock, I was so desperate in life. I wanted to end my life. I took poison in my hand. Then I told God, if you don't want me to die now, give me a sign. I'll give you 5 minutes. So the fellow gave God a time, 5 minutes. If you don't want me to die, you give me a sign. Exactly that moment the phone rings and he takes the phone and sees the caller ID, God calling. He was frightened, shaking. He didn't even dare to attend the phone. God calling, he gave God time, within 5 minutes showed me a sign, God calling, he didn't touch. And the phone rang a couple of times, and then he heard about the idea of suicide. He was wondering how could God, which Airtel or Vodafone, from where he is calling. He was thinking only on Thursday, after several days, he got the courage of calling back that number. Then the pastor says, yes, it's correct. Our church name is God Calling Church, so we have registered the name as God Calling. My dear friends, at last moment he surrendered himself to God. If you want me to live, give me a sign. And God chose the mistake of the pastor to save his life. The pastor even did not know that he saved his life. That is the power of God. And that is the result of trust. You know, the pastor must have called his wife several times. Why he made mistake only on that day? Either his wife changed the phone number or he changed the wife, I don't know. Why he exactly made that day the mistake? And that time, if it is 1 hour before or 1 hour later, this fellow would have successfully committed suicide. And above all, how he exactly chose that 10-number digit. Even if one number was different, the call would have gone to somebody else. Yes or no? It's the last 3 digits, 345 or 346 or 347. If you had done any of that thing, even one digit in the 10 digits, the call would have gone to somebody else and he would have died. And what is the possibility? Mathematical proposition, 10 to the power 10 numbers he had that option. Or at least the first 5 numbers, let us say it is the country code, state code, district code. What is the last 5 numbers? 5 to the power 5. So many thousands and millions of options, possibilities are there. But of all the millions of numbers set up, he chose that number by mistake. For us and for him is a mistake, but not for God. God is so powerful. That's why we never have to lose hope in God, hope in the ways of God. And when we don't lose the hope, naturally we will not lose meaning in our lives. Now, in order to not to lose hope in God, we need to count our blessings, my dear friends. Very often we take them for granted, the number of blessings that God has given to us. We always think of the one thing which God has not given after praying many years, many days or weeks or years. Only that we'll be thinking. We gloriously forget all the hundreds of things which God has given to us without our asking. Very simple example. At home, children may be asking their parents for one chudidar or phone or whatever maybe. They may say not now, maybe later, next time for your birthday or for your Christmas or when you grow up. And the children will be thinking only that, oh, I asked my parents, they did not give. They'll be thinking only that thing which they did not give. In the process, they'll be gloriously forgetting all the 100 things that the parents are doing to the children without their asking. Preparing their food, washing their clothes, getting them ready for the school, preparing the bed. The children are not perfect. We are also children in the example. But we need not do the same mistake the children do because we are grown-ups. We need to be aware of God's blessings. A couple of examples I can give. If you have a family to live with, if you have someone to share your joys and sorrows, then you are more blessed than millions of people who don't have a family, who have never even experienced what love is, as they don't have anyone to love or to love. That's why I'll tell, if your wife fights with you, if your husband fights with you, be happy, at least there is someone to fight with you. I'm not encouraging fight. The point is, millions of people don't have anything to love or to love. When we have a family, often we think that family is a problem, but family is a grace. Family is a blessing. If you live in a good house and have some free time and some books to read and relax, you are one of the very elite group in the top 20% of people in the world. Because 80% of people don't have free time to read books. If you wake up this morning with good health, you are more fortunate than millions of people who are going to die today or who went to bed yesterday did not see the light of the day. If you have not experienced the dangers of a battle or a war, no, unfortunately, Ukraine, Russia, people, just imagine. We speak so much about hope. 5 million people have been migrants now to other countries. Their future is totally a big question mark. And it's really stupidity to wage a war. We claim to be a civilized human race. But when we wage war, when we kill people, we are the most stupid people of all the creation in the world. That's why Einstein beautifully said, if they were in the Third World War, there won't be any winners or losers. Because we all have nuclear bombs, we will put on one another, and we all know that. Not only human beings, all the living creatures, birds, animals, fish, what sin have they done to die like that? Just because they are living along with us. In fact, before we came into existence, they were living. And all the plants, all the bacteria, every living being will die because of the radiation. Only the buildings will be there. And the buildings will look at us and all the dead human beings. These fellows knew how to make the buildings, they did not know how to live in that building. Very true. So, you have not experienced the dangers of the battle or a war, the loneliness without your friends, dear and near ones, the agony of being a refugee in a foreign land, the fear of imprisonment or the pangs of starvation, then you are more blessed than 500 millions of people in the world. If you can attend a religious meeting like this, or any form of worship without any fear of harassment, arrest, torture, or death, you are more fortunate than 300 crores of people in the world. If you have some food in the fridge, doesn't matter what food it is, if you have some food in the fridge, some clothes in the cupboard, a roof over your head, a floor to sleep on, you are richer than 75% of the people in the world. If you have some money in the purse or in the bank, be happy because you are among the top 8% of the world's population because 92% of the people don't have bank accounts. And this will be very interesting. How many of you are above 65? You can put up your hands. Above 65 age. I know you will shy. Don't worry, your wife knows your age. Yeah, I'll put down my hand because you will think I am about 65, I'm just 25. See, Balazar is happy. Alright, it's okay. Now all those people above 65, you are blessed because only 8% of the people in the world are above 65. So let us give a big clap to them. All the other people die before that go back to God. So if you are age 65, of course you have your own ailments, problems and difficulties, but you are blessed because only 8% they are able to see that age. My dear friends, if all these facts don't convince you, because some of you look very suspiciously, if all these things don't convince you, at least think about this one. If you are able to hear this message, you are more lucky than the thousands and thousands of people who are born deaf. Am I right? If you are able to read this message, of course it is written, you are more fortunate than the millions of people who are blind. Of course, the deaf people and the visually handicapped people, they have other talents, it is true, but not able to speak, not able to see, it's a big problem. Sometime back, the Cry Foundation, Child Relief and Youth, Cry Foundation gave an advertisement in the television. It's a social organization helping children in their education, and they want to remove the child labor, they want to educate children, and they have the advertisement 2 or 3 lines written on the screen of the television upside down. The lines written upside down, it says, if you are not able to read these lines because they are written upside down, don't worry, you are more fortunate than millions of children who don't even know that it's a language written upside down. Very true. We know it's a language written upside down, but there are, unfortunately, illiterate children, they do not know it is a language written upside down. At least this must have convinced you, my dear friends. Yes, when we don't count our blessings, we lose hope in life. When we lose hope, we lose meaning in life. When we lose meaning in life, we lose life itself. But the risen Jesus is a reaffirmation of hope